So, as I was thinking about what I should cover this week, I was feeling rather bored, and when I usually get bored, I would send my neighbor flowers pretending to be his ex. But the arguing is getting more teary and less screamy, so I kinda have to resort to something else. And that something else was Skylanders Swap Force. Now, while I was hunting down a swapper's upper body, because good lord those halves get lost so easily, I would stumble upon a trap, and after staring at these two objects for an ungodly amount of time, I would get an idea. I have experience with nearly every single Skylanders gimmick except for 2, and after a bit more pondering, I decided that it would be best to actually pit all of these gimmicks against each other to see which one would end up being the best. But since this is going to be a massive undertaking, I need to establish some rules first. Firstly, I won't just be covering the games as a whole and call that the gimmick. Instead, I will cover things that I consider to be gimmicks, those being the giants, the swappers, the trappers, the trappable villains, the minis, because holy hell, Trap Team is just loaded with stuff, the Superchargers, the Imaginators, and the Senseis. The reason why Superchargers Racing is being left out is because it's more like a mini game, so it will be tied in with the Supercharger section. And the reason why the Trap Masters and the Trappable Villains were split apart is because of how small of an influence they have on each other. I also asked my Discord if these two should be separated, and the Discord overwhelmingly agreed that they were two separate gimmicks, but I will touch upon how they connect in their sections. Secondly, the Imaginators and the Senseis will be labeled as NA, mainly because I haven't experienced these gimmicks myself and it would be pretty unfair to give them a rating, but I will discuss them throughout the video and they will be labeled as such. Thirdly, the cores will not be part of this video since they themselves vary drastically from game to game and they serve as the non-gimmick group. Fourthly, I will be ranking them using the 4 guidelines, those being how fun the gimmick is, what they provide beyond their gimmick, how their gimmick is utilized or in some cases expanded upon in sequel games, and how the gimmick is priced, but that last one won't play as much as a factor compared to the others. Fifthly, I will not go over how good or bad individual Skylanders belonging to a gimmick are unless it's a major factor for why that gimmick works or doesn't. And finally, this is just my opinion, so if you disagree, tell me in the comments why you believe so. So there we have it. That's 8 gimmicks across 5 different Skylanders games all crammed together in a single Neon Batteries video. Will your favorite gimmick make it to the top of the podium? Well, let's get going and find out. Even though I don't really want to talk about the minis since the whole community, including myself, has talked about them to death, I still need to include them according to my rules, so I won't be here for long. The minis are pretty much exactly what you think they are. They are smaller and cuter versions of their bigger counterparts, and that is literally the only thing that makes them stand apart, outside of 8 of them being some of the worst magic items this franchise has ever seen. The big problem with the minis is the fact that their whole gimmick is that they are just small Skylanders, which means they all have movesets that are exactly the same as their originals, and as you could probably guess, this didn't exactly work out since many of them either lost a crap ton of range, or you have to be very close to actually do any damage. But that's just Trap Team since they get ridiculously harder to use in Imaginators and Superchargers, with Imaginators being an absolute nightmare of a game. And even though I wasn't able to verify what price these were at the time, it's somewhere around the $10 to $15 range, meaning the minis are actually more expensive than their original counterparts. Once again, these are just glorified cores and Activision's most obvious attempt to milk you for money. Let's get going to the next one. Trap Masters as gimmicks are far better than the minis, but that doesn't mean that they don't have their own problems. But before I get into that, let's talk about their purpose. These Skylanders have special Traptanium weapons that not only do additional damage to villains, along with extending the timer for trap villains, but they are also the only Skylanders that can smash Traptanium crystals across the game. And open Traptanium gates, and this is where my problems start. Outside of these two gimmicks, the Trap Masters are basically cores with more health since Traptanium crystals and Traptanium gates are exclusive to Trap Team and fall off the face of reality afterwards, at least gameplay wise. Not to mention that even in Trap Team, they are tied to the most BS gimmick extensions to ever exist. Like seriously, who the hell decided that taking an already existing mechanic and forcibly bolting it to the Trap Masters was a good idea? What's even worse is that the core parts and even the minor aspects of their gimmicks don't carry over to the next. They are once again glorified cores. And we didn't even go over the fact that you need to buy 8 or 9 of them if you just want to experience all of these gates, which means you're shelling out $160 at best, and that's why they are above the minis, because they at least have the decency to be different characters. The Superchargers as a whole are pretty similar to the Trap Masters in the sense that they are just glorified cores, and for the Superchargers, it's arguably worse. Yes, giving old Skylanders a new coat of paint is awesome and all, but outside of that, the only thing that sets them apart from the cores is that they are the only Skylanders that can customize vehicles, and if paired with the right one, supercharge them. At this point, you are probably wondering why I put the Superchargers over the Trap Masters, and the reason why is because of the vehicles themselves, since they not only introduce a new type of gameplay in the form of vehicle sections, but they also introduce an entirely new game mode as well. The Supercharger's gimmick is most likely the most packed compared to the others content-wise, but that doesn't mean that they don't have any sort of issues. Firstly, locking customization behind the Supercharger Skylanders, as in you could use the vehicles with other Skylanders but you can't upgrade them, is just ridiculous. Like Trappers and Traptanium Gates, it's just an artificial restriction. And secondly, you are required to use the gimmick, since if you don't, you just can't get through certain sections of the game, unless you have the Portal Owners Pack where it gives you one. But that doesn't alleviate the situation, since if you don't like land vehicle sections or vehicle arenas, you just can't avoid it like you can for other gimmicks. Plus, they were pretty expensive too, since they usually came together with their vehicles, the Skylanders being around 15 individually, while the vehicles were allegedly 20, so that's why they are taking 4th spot. On to the next one. The Imaginators, being the final gimmick alongside the Senseis, are actually rather creative Skylanders, but they are unfortunately crippled by a few things. The Imaginators are customizable Skylanders and exist in the form of creation crystals, which controls what element your Imaginator is going to be. Alongside that, Imaginators can be one of 10 different battle classes, and the Skylanders have a crapload of customization that you can get both in-game and from Senseis, along with being able to learn secret techniques from said Senseis. But there's actually two different aspects of the Imaginators that sully them in my eyes, the first of which being that once you choose your class, you're pretty much locked to it and can't do anything about it. For example, let's say that you decide to pick the Swashbuckler class and you don't really like its playstyle. Well, if you want to play as something else, you'll just have to go out and buy another $10 creation crystal or wipe it using an exploit. And the second reason is that even though customization is a massive part of this gimmick, some classes actually lock parts of your body away from you, like the legs for the aforementioned Swashbuckler class. All in all, the Imaginators are pretty neat with some flaws, but since I wasn't able to test them out on their own turf, they will be listed as unranked. In the grand scheme of things, the Giants are kind of the middle ground when it comes to this ranking, since they pretty much set the standard for what Gimmick Landers should be. The Giants are special in the sense that there is only one for each element, and that they all serve as bigger and tankier Skylanders that have more health and can dish out even more damage. But alongside that, in their debut game, there was a plethora of stuff for them to do. They could perform feats of strength, pick up boulders and logs to throw at opponents or obstacles, smash through towers, walls, and stuff that requires explosives and things that normal Skylanders can't. And this stuff isn't element specific, so all you really need is Tree Rex, the giant that you get in every starter pack for Giants. And they also cost like $10 each, so yeah, you are really getting your money's worth. But the thing that makes them stand out to me more than most of the other gimmicks is how most of their traits can carry over to other Skylanders games. You could use a giant to destroy walls that require explosives in Trap Team. I was able to find rocks that you could pick up and throw scattered across Trap Team as well. And like the gold chest from Giants, the Giants have their own special giant chest in Swap Force that doesn't affect the completion of a level that only they can unlock. They can even defeat Chompies and destroy objects like barrels and crates by walking through them like they can in Giants across all the games afterwards. And the only reason I don't bring up Superchargers in that whole spiel is because I genuinely haven't tested any of this there yet, but if memory serves me correctly, you can at least walk through objects and break them. At this point, you might be wondering why they are so low on the podium if they have this much praise, and that's mainly because of how they are affected in other games. The weighty and slow movements of a bigger Skylander opens the player up to attacks often, and because of their large hitboxes, they get clocked by literally everything, and ranged enemies that usually don't serve as a problem can be utter nightmares in many different circumstances, and because of this, I'm giving them 3rd place. This may be a shock to many of you due to my past track record with Trap Team, but compared to other gimmicks, this one is really good for the sole reason that it gives you like double the usual roster size. And I'm not even joking, there's like 80 plus villains you can find and trap in this game. If you defeat a villain in Skylanders Trap Team, you get the option to trap that villain. And if you own a trap that aligns with the element, if you insert it into the portal, you can trap that villain and play as them. Instead of having a normal health bar, villains instead have a timer that can be shortened by taking damage. But to increase this timer, you can either use a trap master when switching to a villain, or you can evolve that villain by finding and completing a side mission, which can range from a whole level inside of a level to basically pressing yes when asked for help. If this was it, it's more than likely that this gimmick would be at the top of my list, but there's 3 things that drag this gimmick down. One that's more of a personal complaint, while the other 2 are far more damning. Starting with the nitpick, once you evolve a villain, you can't unevolve them, and the reason why I, and many others don't like this, is because some of their evolved versions are just complete eyesores to look at compared to their usual ones. Other than that, traps at the time did not come cheap, since most of the time they were bundled together or with something else. But if you were able to find an individual trap, I'm pretty sure it would have costed you like $8. And if you want to experience all of the villains in this game, you would have to buy, at the minimum, 8 more traps to actually access the rest of them, with 2 of these traps being in $30 adventure packs. And finally, if you got Skylanders Superchargers, you may notice that the Portal of Power for that game has a trap slot on the engine, so that may make you think that you can actually use your traps in that game. But in all actuality, if you decide to put your trap villain onto the portal, it will reward you with a Sky Stone. So that's second place. But before we get to the winner of today, there's one more gimmick that we need to discuss. Now, as discussed earlier, one of the last gimmicks to ever officially release for the Skylanders franchise was the Senseis, and from the looks of things, they seem to have also fallen into the core pitfall that a lot of the others on the list have fallen into. The Senseis are able to bestow secret techniques that can be taught to your Imaginator, but they are also the only Skylanders that can unlock Sensei shrines that align with their class, activate battle gongs and be able to participate in the challenge that it offers, and access Sensei elemental realms, which requires a Sensei. I'm going to be completely honest when I say that if these guys were on this list, they would probably be somewhere near the bottom, probably right above the minis, because at least the Trap Masters didn't have the audacity to be $20. Yes, the cutscenes for the Sensei shrines are cool and all, but it doesn't make up for the most watered down version of an elemental gate, and having stats so unreasonably high, at least damage wise, that they practically made everything else that came before obsolete because they can't reach the damage numbers that the Senseis and Imaginators can. But due to what I set up earlier, they will be unranked. Even though I'm a little biased, the Swap Force gimmick has to be the best in the franchise, not just because of what they did for the gimmicks as a whole, but because they seem to be the only gimmicks that don't have any major drawbacks, unless we count them in Skylanders Imaginators, but that's kinda screwed up for everyone. The Swap gimmick allows you to mix and match the top halves and bottom halves of Skylanders across 16 different figures, and at first you wouldn't think that this was special until you realize that's 256 combinations. This pretty much makes every single swapper that you can buy viable, since if you don't initially like a swapper, you can mix and match their halves with other swappers until you get something that you want, since the upgrade paths for the upper and lower halves are separate and can be used for any Skylander they're mixed with. Yes, this system does rely on you having multiple different swappers, but the swappers were just $15 at the time, and if you decide to get 4, which is $60, you now have 64 different combinations if you have Swashbuckler and Blast Zone from the starter pack. On their own, the swappers are really good, but Vicarious decided to go even farther than they had to in the form of swap zones in dual gates. The dual gates are relatively simple. If you have the 2 elements required present, the gate will open for you, and even though they were intended for the swappers, you can still get through them using other Skylanders by just having 2 of them present. That's right, out of every special variation of the elemental gates from Swap Force and beyond, the dual gates are the only ones that do not require the gimmick of their game to open them. But the swappers are required in one other aspect of this game, and that's the swap zones. There are 8 different types of swap zones scattered across the game: rocket, climb, bounce, dig, spin, speed, teleport, and sneak. And each one of them provides some sort of mini-game that's only accessible to swappers with the matching symbols on their lower halves. And these aren't just mini-games that are thrown out once either. There are so many spread across this game that you can actually go back and play specific ones in the menu once you complete it for the first time. And to add on, these levels weren't just thrown in here for content's sake. Some of these levels are so varied and full of depth that I was actually disappointed to learn that they never carried over to the other games, along with the dual gates. Those were the only aspects of the swappers left behind too, and that's the big reason why the Swap Force are at the top of this ranking, or at least one of the major ones. Their game doesn't define their gimmick to the point that they're reduced down to cores, struggle compared to the newer generation, or just don't exist. They can still swap their halves, and it still has a major effect on how you play the game. And that's why the swappers are the best gimmick in the Skylanders franchise. But that's just my thoughts, so I want to hear about what you think in the comments down below. I'm pretty sure that I missed something in the Sensei and Imaginators sections, and I might have missed stuff in the others. But with that being said and done, I would like to thank you all for watching. Like always, hit the subscribe button if you enjoy content like this, share this around so I can grow as a channel, leave some comments down below to make the algorithm happy, check out Return to Skylands, its Discord, and a bunch of other cool stuff down in the description below, hype up the video to spread the video to the masses, and I will see you all in the next one.